Hey guys, welcome back to Staying Connected, a podcast where I talk to other people with Vascular Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, or VEDS, which I also have. This is Katie, your host, and today I have a very special guest all the way from New Zealand. Lucy is going to tell us about her story with VEDS. Hey, Lucy.
Hi.
I cannot believe that we can do this call from all the way across the world.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you yourself have VEDS?
Yes, yeah. I am positive for VEDS, yeah.
And how old are you?
How old am I now? I'm 38.
Awesome. When did you find out that you had VEDS?
I officially found out when I was 36. So, what's that, about a year and a half ago? July 2018
Wow.
was when we got the official diagnosis.
And
Um,
how did that come about?
so it was a bit of a a long process, I guess. Not as long as some people's. But I think it was November 2017, I ruptured my splenic artery, an aneurysm on there, and I was pretty fit and healthy and living a normal life when it happened, and they found a lot of other things sort of going on, and was like, well, that's kind of a bit weird. And and then I think it was 8 months later, yeah, in July, that I got the official diagnosis.
Can you tell me
That
about that experience with the splenic
yeah,
rupture?
yeah. So like I said, I was really fit and healthy, and it was it happened at night time, and my husband Michael was away on business that night, and he was just on his way home, and I was in bed, and I just felt this like sudden pop, I feel like, in my belly, and I actually think I said out loud, like I was on my own, but I was like, "Oh, that didn't feel right." Um, and I thought I was going to vomit, so I went to the bathroom, and that kind of I didn't, and then I think I collapsed. It was really hard to kind of, like it'll kind of a weird experience. And my husband, thankfully, was on his way home and found me collapsed in the hallway. And I really just thought I had like really bad stomach virus, or maybe a burst appendix if it was the worst, but I couldn't move. It was really painful. It's like probably the worst pain I've ever had in my life. Um, and I couldn't get back up again. And he walked in and was like, "Ooh, you don't look so good." And he asked me, he's like, I remember him asking, should I call an ambulance? And I was like, normally I'm, like, oh, no, I'll be fine. But I thankfully was like, yeah, I think that might be a good idea. Um, and so I went to hospital. He stayed at home with the kids. And it was actually quite a few hours before they realized what was actually going on. Um, Being a female, they asked the obvious, like, you sure you're not pregnant?
hmm
I was like, no, definitely not. um, I was pretty sick. I wasn't very. It was a bit of a blur, but I think I had X-rays and other examinations, and I remember I had these junior doctors that were like, "Oh, we don't really know what's going on," and kind of shrugged their shoulders, like, "Yeah."
Oh
And
no.
then I eventually went in for a CT scan, and it was in the CT scan that I actually deteriorated, and I couldn't breathe at all. So like for those when it happens, like it's like a really horrible, heavy feeling, like I guess the all that bleeding inside
hmm
makes it really hideous. Um, and the last thing I remember is all these people kind of coming into the room, and I remember looking at the monitor and being like, "Oh, those numbers do not look good." I think it was my blood pressure,
hmm
and shouting for a resus cart, and blood and all this sort of stuff. And I remember being in a lot of pain and then all of a sudden just being not at all in pain. I think it was just that probably those last moments before I completely crashed out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I woke up in ICU a few days later.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so lucky that your husband was on his way home.
Yeah. So I think I probably would have just eventually tried to make my way back into bed and I wouldn't be here
Mm-hmm.
if he hadn't come home.
So several months later, you got genetic test results that showed that you had vascular EDS.
Yeah.
And how did that feel?
Because it was a really long process, I kind of dealt with it reasonably slowly in a way. So I had already by that stage decided that I had it. Like when I, looking at all the information, doing research, everything started to kind of make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back at my history. And interestingly, the geneticist, when I saw him, was like, oh, you don't look like you have EDS. So, okay. Other than my old hands, apparently, I have really old-looking hands. Old lady
I do
hands.
too.
Yeah. No fat on them, apparently, and aged. Yeah, but I remember the day that I got the call, and thankfully my mum and dad were actually here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fine on the phone. They told me over the phone, because obviously I'd already had gone through all the processes of having an appointment and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a meeting with them a couple of weeks later. But yeah, I did cry. It was really hard. I guess that feeling of a life lost, if that makes sense. Like you're grieving the life that was and what the future holds, and it's really bizarre feeling being told you have something that's life-threatening and could potentially shorten my life, but at the same time not knowing it's a really bizarre feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Yeah, it's been hard. Yeah.
How have you coped with that? How has that changed for you over the last year and a half? Has that changed for you? From that initial feeling?
Yeah, it's definitely been ups and downs, and I mean, I'm really lucky. I have an amazing husband and family, and my kids are awesome, and my mum and dad and siblings and things. But having the support groups has been really helpful to process that. But I think you go through these sort of what was life and what is life now kind of thing. So yeah, it's much better now. I think you just have to get on with it. Like, you know what I mean? Like you just kind of like, well, this really sucks. But you can't just sit around waiting because that's what they say to you, right? It's just a watch and wait game.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't just sit around feeling sad about it. And it's okay. Some days you do. Some days I have just those moments of what the heck is this? Why? And why me and all that. But mostly it's just kind of like, well, it is what it is. And yeah, I think I just feel quite lucky that I've got really good supportive network.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you said that it kind of made sense with your history. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so like most people, a lot of unexplained bruising and spontaneous bruising. So if I look back, there were a few times that I'd been to the doctors because I'd had like massive hematomas from nothing that were incredibly painful. I think, one time I was just bending down, crouching down, and I felt, that burning sensation in the back of my calf, and it really hurt. And then I had the biggest bruise there, and I'd just been crouching, so that was weird. And I dropped a slice of cucumber once on my foot, and I got the biggest bruise. It was literally just a little slice of cucumber. It was the weirdest thing. And I mean, we used to laugh about it. It's like, oh, I'm so sensitive and fragile.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke to mum, and she said that I did bruise a lot as a child, and I got a lot of those, the little tiny bruises. And I got tested. They took me for some testing, but nothing. It was, not conclusive to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Constant ear infections as a
Oh my
child.
gosh, me too.
Like so I was 2 weeks old when I saw a specialist for my ears, and they ruptured, and it was so fast all the time. I would tell mum I had an ear, my ears felt funny, or I used to say my ears were singing. And then by the time she got me to the doctors, they had already ruptured. So constant, every year I think my ears ruptured.
Yeah, I had that problem. I had ear tubes several times.
Yeah.
And it was like every time I had an ear infection, it was like ear infection, rupture.
Yeah.
So fast.
And it's so weird because I don't think doctors would connect that with VEDS. But talking to people, or, seeing on the group, there's a lot of people who have a lot of ear problems, and I guess it makes a lot of sense. So that, I didn't have really anything other than the spontaneous bruising.
Mm-hmm.
And a few months before before I ruptured my aneurysm, I had quite a few big spontaneous bruises, hematomas happen. But again, they do the standard blood tests, just for bleeding disorders and things, and of course nothing comes up. So I had that. I had 2 pretty normal pregnancies, as I'm very, very lucky, lucky to have children. I tore quite badly in the first one, and in the second one, thankfully, I chose to have an elective cesarean, which is very lucky.
Yeah.
I don't know what would have happened if I'd actually tried to go through a normal birth. Now that we know what we know.
So you have 2 daughters, right?
So 2 daughters. Mercedes is 10 and Zaria is 8.
And did either of them inherit it?
Yeah, so we got the girls tested a little bit after I got tested. So they actually didn't want to test the girls in New Zealand. They recommended that we wait till they were older. But we just really felt that, knowing what we knew, that it was important to just, I just didn't want to wonder and be protecting them from something if they didn't actually have it. So we got them tested, and Mercedes came back negative, and my youngest, Zaria, came back positive.
And what did that feel like?
Yeah, that was hard, but strangely it wasn't as hard as when I found out. I think because maybe I'd already realized, or already read all the information and suspected.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Mercedes had have come back positive, I might have been surprised. I would have been really surprised. Whereas Zaria, we just knew she looks like she has VEDS. She's hypermobile. Like her thumbs bend all the way back. It's so bizarre holding her hands. She's quite pale, thin skin, all the kind of physical just things. Lots of GI issues. So yeah, and it was hard as well. I guess there's a lot of guilt, I guess, that goes with knowing that you've given your child something that's so horrible. It really stink. But I can't change it, so we've just done everything we can to prepare her without freaking her out. So she knows she has it in a simple way.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What do you do to protect her differently than Mercedes?
um, well, we had a meeting with school, so we've had to go into school and explain to them, what she has, and what they would need to do should something happen. Obviously, with they sort of say that it's not as likely to happen in a major event in a child, but it does happen. Um, she hasn't had anything significant, but we haven't changed a lot really. We're still, we have a trampoline. She's still allowed to go on that. Um, we just probably wouldn't let her do things like maybe gymnastics if she wanted to do that,
Mm-hmm.
as a proper sport. Really, not too much. We're just probably a little bit more aware if she says something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
And, like she fell off the bed and hit her head, and got a massive lump, and we did end up having to take her to ER and just sort of sit around and monitor her
Oh
with that.
no.
And she was fine. She was totally fine. But I mean, she does seem to get these massive um, bumps
Mm-hmm.
from something usually pretty minor. And she has a lot of tummy issues that are kind of not really, nothing significant. We don't really know what's going on, but she just doesn't um, do well on certain foods and just always has had a sore stomach
Mm-hmm.
from really little. So,
Yeah, I had those problems when I was a kid too.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's
It
weird,
was
eh? Like,
it's really bad.
because there's no kind of answer to it. And when we used to take her to the doctors before all this, it was, oh, she's just a toddler. It's just normal. Oh, it doesn't feel normal
Yeah,
for a
I was sick all the time, and
kid.
they tried, I mean, I ended up on like a pretty restrictive diet because they said it was like acid reflux, but really, I guess they never really got an answer. The answer was that maybe her system is just slower than it should be. And so I'd have to eat like 3 hours before I laid down, and we had
Oh,
bricks under the front of my bed and all of that stuff. And I still have had problems as an adult,
yeah,
but it hasn't been as severe as it was when I was a kid. It was bad.
yeah. So it's just kind of hurt from eating.
Yeah,
Do you,
I would get a sore stomach and then I would throw up
mm,
really often. I was like vomiting all the time
ah,
for
oh, that's
me.
not good.
No.
Yeah.
Does she get the severe stomach pain?
Yeah, she doesn't vomit as much as she used to, but yeah, she'll just be like, "Oh," and you hear her in the night. She's asleep, but she's moaning
Oh.
from the pain. And we definitely noticed that if she eats too much bread or heavy kind of foods, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like it just bruises her as it digests. Is kind of what I think, but I don't know. It's so they don't really know, and she does, yeah, vomit sometimes. Just she used to vomit all the time in the car. It was so annoying. Um, yeah, you have no idea. Vomit in car seats is just disgusting. Um, yeah,
I did that to one of my uncle's cars when I was a kid. I felt so bad.
yeah.
It was like I didn't quite make it out of the car. I was almost there.
I know. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
for her. I hope that gets better as she gets older.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. We seem to have be able to manage it ourselves now. She was on a lot of laxatives,
Hmm.
but we found that they actually just were causing other issues, other way around. So we find that if she just eats a really clean sort of diet, less processed foods, and we
Hmm.
seem to manage it reasonably well. So
That's
at the
good.
moment, anyway. So fingers
That's good.
crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So, do either of your parents have vets, or are you the first in your family?
No, I'm first, so is it de novo? Yeah, both my parents were tested. We didn't think that they did because they're both in their 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it seemed unlikely, but we did get them tested just more so that because I have two sisters and a brother. So, wanting to make sure that if it was something that was passed down to me, that they could also be tested. But no, my parents both came back negative.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've mentioned New Zealand a couple times, the care there. Can you tell me, like, what has it been like having VEDS and being in New Zealand?
Um, it's been good and hard. So I have had really great doctors, particularly when I was first in hospital, and the fact that they really pushed um, for a diagnosis, basically, because they were like, you're 35 years old, you're fit, you're healthy, you shouldn't have aneurysms and tortuous veins and all this sort of random stuff that they found. So that in that sense, they were really good. But unfortunately, in New Zealand, there's no specialists. We don't have a VEDS team or one particular doctor who's sort of following anything to do with VEDS at all.
Mm.
Um, so that's been the hardest thing for me is I've had to like do a lot of research, and I've learned that you have to be your own advocate. And I think previous to that, you go to the doctors, you say what's wrong, they give you a treatment, and you walk away, and that's what you're used to. But then when you get something like this, you suddenly realize that you have to actually be looking into stuff yourself and pushing for certain things. So they have been really, really good, but they also sort of lack in other areas. I had to set up my own kind of care team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what it's like over there, but you read all the information. It says you should have a care team, and I did have one sort of situation that happened that was just really frustrating. I had some issues with diverticulitis
Mm-hmm.
and had been in hospital for it, and they sent me afterwards for a colonoscopy, and
Oh.
I was like, well, I'm not sure I'm supposed to have a colonoscopy. I'm not sure it's safe. So I spoke with my GP. I rang her up and I said, well, they're sending me for this. And so GP is general, your general doctor.
Mm-hmm.
They're sending me for this colonoscopy, and I just don't think it's a good idea. And I don't want to go because it's through public system. So you don't meet with them first. You just prepare for the colonoscopy
Oh.
and go in. And I don't know if you've had one before, but
Mm-mm.
you have to. It's horrendous preparing for it. And she's like, oh, they know your situation, and they would. You just need to go. And it's like, okay, are you sure? I really want you to ring. And she was like, no, I'll be fine. So I took all that laxatives. It was horrible. I went to the appointment. I took all the information about VEDS because I was really concerned, and I felt it just didn't feel right. And I didn't think it was necessary as well with, yes, I had diverticulitis, but it wasn't out of control. So I went to this appointment, and in the end, they sent me home. And they were like, yeah, we don't feel very comfortable doing this now that we know what we know.
That's frustrating.
I was fuming. I was so mad. I was still working at that point, so I'd taken time off work. My husband had to take time off work because they'd said, you need someone else to drive you
Mm-hmm.
home. I was just so mad. So I went to a wee while later, I think it was a month later because it was nearly Christmas. I went to my GP with my husband and said, look, we need to set something up here. That wasn't okay. It was annoying, and I need a care team. I need to kind of know that I'm good, that I can come into you, and that you're going to do what you need to do to help me. And she said, I don't feel competent to be your doctor.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just like, okay. Uh, and that was just super frustrating when that was quite early on as well. So we
Yeah.
were still dealing with everything, and it was frustrating to have somebody that we felt should have been a support. Like she wasn't terrible, but yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, she said, I'll ask, some of the other younger doctors if they're keen to be your doctor. Nobody, nobody in the practice wanted to be my doctor. And I'm not a difficult person. It's not like I'm going there and ringing there all the time and being annoying. They just didn't want to be my doctor, and yeah, that was really horrible.
Wow. Did you
Yeah,
find somebody after that?
yeah, I did, and she's amazing. I'm really, really lucky to. So I had to go to a different practice and kind of almost beg in a way for them to
Mm-hmm.
take me on. I weren't taking on new patients, and I'm out of their zone. It's not that far away, but um, so yeah, I found one, and the first appointment I went in, and she was just amazing. She said, I don't know much about this, but we'll do this together and we'll hold each other's hand, was her words. And I was just like,
Oh,
you're amazing. That's all I asked for. It wasn't that I was looking for someone to go and spend hours researching and things. It was just knowing that they were going to take it seriously and
mm-hmm.
advocate for it, really. That's really all it was. So I'm pretty happy to have her. She's pretty impressive.
That's great. It's nice to hear, like, I don't know a lot about this, but I'm gonna learn.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's something about that mentality that is so much more comforting.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We don't need them. Honesty is great. And they don't know everything. Why would they if they've not had a patient with it? But
Right.
just knowing that they're actually going to just be there is really nice. And I sent her an email of the new website. Is it the VEDS movement
Mm-hmm.
website?
Yeah.
And when I got to my next appointment, she was so excited about it. She'd looked it all up, and she emailed the doctors. They have the little bit for the doctors. She'd
Mm-hmm.
already, emailed, and I just thought, yeah, you're cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Have you met anybody else in New Zealand who has vets?
I've met one lady. She's really lovely. I've only met once. She does live in Auckland or just outside of Auckland, but it's been hard to meet up. And I know there's a few other people, but there's really not very many of us, or many that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody out there, please contact me because it's it's kind of lonely, eh? Having this um, and not being able to talk to people in the same situation.
Yeah. So if you were talking to somebody else who is just diagnosed, is there anything that you would tell them that you've learned over the last year and a half?
Ooh, good question. Um, take it one step at a time um, is a good thing. I think that it's a process. It's exactly like grieving for anything else. When you find out that you've got something like this, and because it's so confusing, and there's a lot of information out there, and some of it's really frightening. Um, but just take it one step at a time. And then I think this kind of goes for everybody, really, like non-vets people, but like live life, just live life, and nurture your relationships because you just don't know when you're gonna go.
And is there anything that if you were going back to the point where you were first diagnosed and you had the opportunity to talk to somebody else who had been through it, is there anything that you wish that somebody had told you?
Ugh, you know what I found? I don't know if this answers the question, but what I found to be frustrating, I guess, is when I was diagnosed was this overwhelming feeling of needing to do everything in life right now. because all of a sudden the reality of I might die tomorrow is put in front of you, and you feel like I have to do everything. I have to do it right now, and I have to live my life. People that kind of Instagram thing at the moment, live your best life. But you know what? Your life is your best life. You don't need to do amazing, crazy things. Does that make sense? I think there's just that feeling like you have to do the best, and it can be really overwhelming when actually just live life. It doesn't have to be this crazy out there amazingness. Just have fun, and don't worry too much. But you can't. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I think that's similar to the way that I try to think about it. Because, like, I guess it's similar in that, like, I try to think of it as I'm not going to regret what I didn't do.
Yes.
Because the decision I made to not do those things was the right decision when I made it.
Yeah, exactly.
And whatever I chose to do instead is what I needed at that time.
Yeah. I think as well, make your own decisions, because there's a lot of stuff out there, and a lot of debate on things you should and shouldn't do. And I think it's a really individual decision. So I think that might be what I want someone to say to me is you have to make the decisions that are right for you. I love going bushwalking, not like totally bushwalking, but we have a few around here. And for a while I wouldn't do them on my own because I was so scared that if something happened, maybe I'd be left there and I wouldn't get out of there because often there's no reception in some of those places. But now I'm doing a little bit more of those things that I love doing, because I realize that you need those things that you love to do. They're really important, and it's kind of I guess that's part of what we live with, is having to make all these decisions all the time that you normally wouldn't think about. Whether it's right to go on a walk on your own is a weird decision.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be something you have to think about, but it is. But I love doing that. It makes me feel it's good for my mental health. I walk every day. I used to, so before I ruptured the aneurysm, I used to do what we call booted exercise. So that's like full on kind of army styles, running with 10 kg sandbags on my back. And
like CrossFit.
Yeah, kind of like CrossFit, but a little bit different. And I loved it because I guess like my journey was I always knew that something wasn't quite right with me. So I'm always tired. And even though I was eating healthy, I just wasn't right. And so I went on this really big journey of like trying to get really super fit, and I loved it. And I was really proud because I achieved all this stuff, and there were certain things that I couldn't do and I struggled with, like burpees. I cannot do burpees, and I always just thought it was because I was really unfit, but now I know that it's all to do with the blood pressure and things. So I'd do a burpee and I'd get to the top and I'd have to like stop while my like head stopped spinning, and then do the next one, and then I'd have to do the same thing again. But so I used to do that, and obviously I can't do that anymore. Not allowed.
Yeah.
So now I walk every day, and I think exercise is really important for our health.
Yeah, you said something really valuable there, that is, it's really important to do things that you love.
Yeah, exactly. So some things have changed for me now, and I can't do them because I'm actually not allowed to, but I found other things that I love doing, and that's really important. And sometimes there are things that are, I do question whether I should be doing them, but I have to just figure it out as I go, really.
Yeah, I think it's like finding a new normal.
But yeah, exactly. It's that new normal, and it's definitely a weird thing to live with.
Mm-hmm.
And then, sometimes things happen, and I don't know about you, but I get like a lot of random pains. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, what is that? Like, do I need to be worried about that? Is that normal? I've always had lots of random pains, and I remember talking to my husband about it. I was like, oh, I always get, that's normal, eh? Like, you get that. He's like, no, I don't think so.
That's always the weirdest feeling when you talk to somebody else about all of these things that you thought were like, quote unquote normal,
Yeah,
and they aren't.
no, not at all. Yeah, it's just, but I just thought they were.
I thought
Um,
everybody felt those things.
Yeah, like so a year before I ruptured, I had the most horrendous stomach pains. I should have gone to hospital now. Like now I look back, I thought, I was so unwell, but I just was like, oh, it's just some sort of a virus probably. I don't know what it was. I might have been having a dissection or something. It was pretty bad. I thought I was going to pass out every time I had the stomach pain. But I just kind of was like, oh, other people get stuff like this, surely. But they don't.
When I dissected my artery in my neck, my carotid artery, I thought I slept on my neck wrong, and the amount of pain that I was in, which was excruciating, was
Oh,
what people normally felt like when they
yeah.
slept on their neck wrong. And the other day I slept on my neck wrong, and I was like, oh, this is the feeling when you sleep on your neck wrong. Like, this is totally more bearable than that other feeling that I ignored for 2 days. Oh,
Oh, but when
it's
you
funny.
don't know, and that's the scary thing with it, there's so many people out there you don't know. We don't get diagnosed, or it's very rare, right, to get diagnosed young.
Yeah.
You get diagnosed after a major event, and for many people, that's death, and that's really scary.
Hmm.
um, I'm really thankful in a way that I shouldn't be here. I lost so much blood. They kept me open for a day or two because I wouldn't, they couldn't stop the bleeding, so they just took me off to ICU, still open,
Wow.
um, because they were and they were trying to figure out why on earth they couldn't stop the bleeding. Um, so that was, yeah,
That's
such
scary.
yeah, really sad. And but the thing is, like, after that happened, I felt so when I got out, I was in hospital 9 days, in ICU for about 3 days, I think. I actually recovered really quickly, and I think because I was generally otherwise healthy. Um, but I felt like I was on this big high afterwards for months. I cheated death. So I was like really excited about life for a while. And when I first said that something else was going on, it didn't really mean anything to me. I was just like, oh yeah, whatever, I'm alive. This is awesome. And I was so happy. And then of course, I guess after a while I started to look a little bit more deeply into what VEDS was.
Hmm.
It's like, oh yeah, okay, maybe that is making a lot of sense. But I was so excited about getting out of hospital, and I was just so grateful for things that I didn't even, that I took for advantage of, really,
Hmm.
um, before that.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm very thankful for you coming on and sharing your story.
you're welcome.
Is there
It's been,
anything that I missed that you wanted to tell the listeners?
um, I just want, I think it's important to make connections with people and share our stories, because I think it's really helpful. And, one of the first things that I saw when I was searching things was you. Was one of your blogs on your experience. I think you were still just kind of finding out and going through things.
Hmm.
It was just so helpful. It was real. All that medical information's important too, but actually just hearing people talking about what they're going through and realizing that you're not alone. and maybe that's what I want to say, is you're not alone. There's lots of us out there, and we're all there for each other. And we might not have met each other, but there's this sort of deep connection there.
There is, for sure, all across the world.
Yeah, all across the world. And we're rare, but we're not that rare either.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. This was Staying Connected, and this was Lucy's telling her story with Vascular Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. If you want to listen to more stories of other people with VEDS, or if you are looking to reach out to other people, go ahead and go to translucent1.blog to find more episodes. And you can also go to the VEDSmovement.org. That's the VEDS movement.org to learn more about VEDS and find virtual support groups and everything. So thank you again, and I will talk to you soon.